It was a quiet night in the park, and Ranger Ian was doing his usual rounds when he saw something strange moving in the bushes. At first he thought it was just an animal, but as he got closer, he realized it was something entirely different. A strange creature that looked like a baby was staring right at him, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. "Who are you?" Ian asked, feeling a sense of unease. "I am the changeling," the creature responded, its voice soft and ethereal. "I have come to seek your help." Ian couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What kind of help could I possibly offer you?" "I am not of this world," the changeling said, "but I have been stranded here, and I cannot find my way back. I need your guidance." Ian was torn between fear and compassion. He had never encountered anything like this before, but something about the changeling's plea touched his heart. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll help you." The changeling led Ian deeper into the woods where they came across a portal that glowed with an otherworldly light. "This is where I came from," the changeling said, "but I cannot find the way back." Ian looked at the portal and felt a sense of dread wash over him. He had no idea what lay beyond it, but he knew it couldn't be good. "Are you sure you want to go back?" he asked. The changeling looked at him with pleading eyes. "I must," it said. "I do not belong here." Ian took a deep breath and stepped forward. As he passed through the portal, he felt a rush of energy course through his body, and he knew that he had entered a world beyond his wildest imagination. "This is getting wild," Ian thought to himself as he gazed at the strange and wondrous creatures that surrounded him. But he had made a promise to the changeling, and he wasn't about to break it. Together they embarked on a perilous journey through this mystical world, encountering all sorts of challenges and obstacles along the way. But through it all, Ian remained steadfast, driven by his desire to help the changeling return home. As their adventure continued, Ian began to realize that he had found something truly extraordinary, a sense of purpose and meaning that he had never felt before, and he knew that he would never be the same again. But their journey was far from over. There were still dangers to face and mysteries to unravel, and Ian and the changeling were determined to see it through to the end. I remember the first time I set foot in Joshua Tree National Park. The vast desert landscape and towering rock formations left me in awe. It was my first job as a park ranger, and I was excited to explore and protect this stunning wilderness. However, I had no idea what was in store for me and my brother, who was visiting me from out of town. It all started on our third night camping in the park. My brother and I were sitting around the campfire, enjoying the silence and admiring the stars. Suddenly, we heard a faint whispering sound coming from the darkness. At first, we thought it was just the wind, but as the whispers grew louder, we knew something was off. We grabbed our flashlights and followed the sound to a nearby rock formation. As we approached, the whispering turned into a low growling noise, and we could see two glowing red eyes staring back at us. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. We froze in fear as the growling grew louder and louder. Eventually, the creature retreated back into the darkness, and we were left shaken and confused. We had no explanation for what we had just witnessed, but we both knew it was something paranormal. Over the next few weeks, strange things began to happen more frequently. We heard unexplainable noises in the night, and our equipment would malfunction for no apparent reason. One night, we even saw a shadowy figure lurking near our campsite, but when we approached, it disappeared into thin air. As a park ranger, I was used to dealing with wild animals and natural phenomena, but this was something else entirely. I started to research the history of the park, hoping to find some answers. That's when I stumbled upon an old legend about a ghostly coyote that roamed the park at night, preying on unsuspecting visitors. According to the legend, the coyote was once a shape-shifting witch who was cursed by a powerful shaman. The witch was transformed into a coyote, doomed to wander the desert for all eternity. It was said that if you ever crossed paths with the coyote, you would be cursed with bad luck for the rest of your life. At first, I didn't believe in the legend, but as more and more strange things happened to us, I couldn't ignore the possibility that the coyote might be real. I confided in a fellow park ranger who told me about a Native American elder who lived on the outskirts of the park. He claimed to have knowledge of the supernatural and could possibly help us. My brother and I decided to pay the elder a visit, hoping he could shed some light on our paranormal encounters. When we arrived at his home, we were greeted by a wise old man who invited us in and offered us tea. We explained our situation, and he listened intently, nodding his head in understanding. The elder told us that the coyote was indeed a powerful spirit that had been angered by the presence of humans in the park. He said that the only way to appease the coyote was to perform a cleansing ritual at a sacred site deep in the park. He warned us that the journey would be dangerous, and we would have to be careful not to anger the spirits along the way. My brother and I agreed to take on the journey, desperate to find a solution to our problem. We spent the next few days preparing for the ritual, gathering supplies, and consulting with the elder on the proper procedure. Finally, the day of the ritual arrived, and we set out into the desert, armed with our supplies and a newfound sense of determination. The journey was long and treacherous, but we eventually arrived at the sacred site. We performed the cleansing ritual, and as we did, we could feel the presence of the coyote spirit around us. We chanted and burned sage, hoping to appease the spirit and lift the curse from ourselves and the park. Suddenly, we heard a loud howling noise coming from the darkness. We knew it was the coyote, and we braced ourselves for the worst. But instead of attacking us, the coyote spirit seemed to calm down and eventually disappeared into the night. We knew then that our ritual had worked and we had successfully appeased the spirit of the coyote. We returned to our campsite feeling relieved and grateful that we could finally rest easy without the fear of paranormal encounters. From that day on, my brother and I never experienced any more paranormal encounters in the park. We continued our work as park rangers, but with a newfound respect for the spirits and legends that haunted the land. Years have passed since our encounter with the coyote spirit, but I still remember it vividly. The experience taught me that there is so much more to the world than what we can see and understand, and that sometimes the answers to our questions lie in the ancient legends and traditions that have been passed down through generations. Joshua Tree National Park will always hold a special place in my heart, not only for its natural beauty, but for the supernatural experiences that brought my brother and I closer together. And while I no longer work as a park ranger, I still find myself drawn to the park and the mysteries that it holds. It was a typical day for park rangers, Alex and Sarah, as they patrolled the vast expanse of Joshua Tree National Park. They had been working together for years, and they knew the park like the back of their hand, but on this particular day, their routine patrol took a terrifying turn. As they were walking along one of the park's many trails, they stumbled upon a gruesome sight. A dead body was lying in a pool of blood, and it was clear that the victim had suffered a brutal attack. Alex and Sarah were stunned, and they immediately called for backup. As they waited for the authorities to arrive, Alex and Sarah began to investigate the scene. They found no evidence of a struggle, and there were no footprints or clues to point to the killer's identity. The victim's belongings were scattered around the area, but there was nothing to suggest a motive for the crime. As the investigation continued, strange things began to happen around the park. Alex and Sarah reported hearing eerie noises and seeing unexplained shadows moving in the distance. They brushed it off as their imagination, thinking that the stress of the investigation was getting to them. But as the days went by, the strange occurrences became more frequent and more intense. They heard whispers in the wind, and they felt as if they were being watched by an unseen presence. Alex began to have vivid nightmares, and Sarah reported feeling as if she was being touched by invisible hands. As the investigation stalled, Alex and Sarah began to delve deeper into the victim's life. They discovered that he had been a paranormal investigator and had been researching the park's history of ghost sightings. Alex and Sarah were skeptical, but they couldn't ignore the strange occurrences around them. One night, as they were patrolling the park, they stumbled upon a group of people gathered around a bonfire. They were chanting in an ancient language, and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. Alex and Sarah were stunned to recognize the victim's face among the group. The group of people turned to face Alex and Sarah, and they felt a surge of energy coursing through their bodies. They realized that they had stumbled upon a group of paranormal enthusiasts who were attempting to communicate with the spirits in the park. Alex and Sarah tried to leave, but they found themselves trapped in a circle of fire. The group began to chant louder and faster, and Alex and Sarah felt as if they were being consumed by the darkness. They saw the victim's face in the flames, and he spoke to them in a ghostly voice. The victim revealed that he had been investigating a powerful entity that resided in the park, a malevolent spirit that had been terrorizing visitors for years. He had believed that he could communicate with the spirit, but instead, he had become possessed by it. Alex and Sarah realized that they were in grave danger. They tried to break free from the circle of fire, but it was too late. The entity had taken control of the victim's body, and now it was coming for them. In a sudden burst of energy, Alex and Sarah broke free from the circle and ran towards safety, but the entity was hot on their heels, and they could feel its presence closing in on them. They ran towards the park's visitor center, hoping to find refuge. As they burst through the door, they were met with a shocking sight. The visitor center was empty, and there was no sign of life. They realized that they had been lured into a trap, and the entity was now in control. Alex and Sarah fought valiantly, but they were no match for the entity's power. They were consumed by the darkness, and their bodies were never found. In the end, the park was closed, and the investigation was shelved. But some say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the echoes of Alex and Sarah's screams, a reminder of the malevolent spirit that lurks in the shadows of Joshua Tree National Park. As a park ranger, John had spent countless hours wandering through the dense forests and rugged terrain of the national park. He knew every inch of the park like the back of his hand and prided himself on his ability to navigate through the wilderness with ease. However, one day, John found himself lost in the very same park he had patrolled for years. It started out as a routine patrol, but John's sense of direction suddenly became disoriented, and he found himself in unfamiliar territory. He tried retracing his steps, but the trees seemed to shift and move, and the trails he had once known so well had vanished without a trace. The more he walked, the more lost he became. With the sun setting and darkness descending, John knew he had to find his way back to his cabin before nightfall. He tried calling for help on his radio, but the signal was weak, and all he could hear was static. He began to panic, realizing that he may have to spend the night alone in the woods. John stumbled upon a small clearing and decided to set up camp for the night. He built a fire and tried to calm his nerves, but the eerie silence of the forest was unsettling. He felt as if he was being watched, and every rustle of the leaves sent shivers down his spine. As the night wore on, John began to hear strange noises coming from the woods. He could hear whispers and murmurs, but he couldn't make out what was being said. He tried to ignore the sounds, thinking it was just his imagination, but the voices grew louder and more persistent. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, and John jumped to his feet, reaching for his flashlight. The figure was a woman, dressed in a flowing white gown with long black hair cascading down her back. She approached John with an outstretched hand, beckoning him to follow her. John was hesitant, but he felt drawn to the woman's beauty and grace. He followed her through the woods, and the voices grew louder and more intense. John felt as if he was being pulled in multiple directions, and he struggled to keep up with the woman's pace. They arrived at a clearing, and John was horrified to see a group of figures gathered around a large bonfire. They were chanting in an ancient language, and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. John realized that he had stumbled upon a group of witches performing a dark ritual. The woman in white led John to the center of the circle, and he felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. The witches began to chant louder and faster, and John felt as if he was being consumed by the darkness. But just as quickly as it had started, the ritual came to an abrupt end. The witches disappeared into the woods, leaving John alone in the clearing. He stumbled back to his campsite, feeling disoriented and confused. The next day, John made his way back to the park office, determined to report the strange incident. But when he arrived, he was met with a shocking revelation. The park office had no record of John ever working there. His name was not in the system, and there was no evidence of his employment. John was stunned. He had spent years working as a park ranger, yet there was no record of it. He tried to explain what had happened in the woods, but no one believed him. He was dismissed as a crazy person, and his claims were ignored. John returned to the woods, hoping to find some evidence of what had happened. But the woods had changed. The trees were different, and the trails he had once known were gone. He realized that he was trapped in a world that was not his own, and he may never find his way back home. In the end, John disappeared into the woods, consumed by the darkness he had encountered. His fate remains a mystery to this day, but some say that he still wanders the woods, lost and alone, forever trapped in an alternate reality.